Good morning to everyone. I am Dr. Colleen Radix, head of the Human and Social Division at the OECS Commission. And we are pleased to welcome you to this webinar being done in collaboration with Norway Registered Development Companies, NRD, on the OECS Single Unique Identifier. What does it take? This webinar begins the formal and informal conversations that will form part of the assessment and action plan for the implementation of an OECS Unique ID. NRD has been contracted as part of the OECS Regional Health Project to undertake this work. And a bit about the project. The OECS Regional Health Project is a World Bank supported project in the amount of US $30.6 million with a main aim to improve preparedness capacities of health systems for public health emergencies in the OECS region. The main components include improving health facilities and lab infrastructure, public health surveillance, and emergency response. The project includes the Caribbean Public Health Agency and the OECS Health Unit as partners alongside the participating OECS member states of St. Lucia, Dominica, Grenada, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This project was conceptualized in late 2018, and I remember an initial meeting of the relevant ministers of health, the then director of CAFA and myself on the margins of the PAHO meetings in Washington. And in record time, the project was approved by the World Bank in August 2019. The timing has been divine intervention, of course, combined with the anticipation of the continued emerging health threats following outbreaks of Ebola globally and Zika and chikungunya in the region. An essential part of the public health response in the OECS has to account for the revised Treaty of Bastille and the free movement, thus the unique ID. So I'm pleased to introduce His Excellency Dr. Digicus Jules, who is the Director General of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. He assumed the post in May 2014, and in this capacity, he's responsible for driving the regional integration thrust towards a single economic and social space involving the OECS states. Dr. Jules has extensive regional and international experience, most of his focus on education, social policy, and organizational transformation. He served as Registrar and CEO of the Caribbean Examinations Council, CXC, from 2008 to 2014, leading a thorough modernization of the council. He served as Vice President of the Human Resources, Cable and Wireless, St. Lucia, Permanent Secretary for Education, as well as Permanent Secretary for Education and a Chief Education Officer in my home, Grenada, during revolutionary times. He has provided consultancy services to national governments, regional and international organizations in the Caribbean, Africa, Europe, and North America, and has chaired the World Bank's Vision 2020 Committee on Education in the Caribbean, and has served on many private sector, educational, and philanthropic boards. He holds a BA from UWI Cape Hill, an MSc in Curriculum and Instruction, a PhD in Educational Policy and Curriculum, as well as an MBA from UNI, and has authored numerous articles on educational policy, reform, as well as the Caribbean and small island states. So I'm pleased to introduce my Director General, Dr. Digicus Jules, to give some opening remarks. Dr. Jules?
Darlene, and thanks to, wish to welcome all the colleagues from the NBC group of the consulting company, NRD, and colleagues of the Commission, as well as all of the stakeholders who are online. The revised Treaty of Bastille can be considered to be an architectural design for the construction of a family home for the member states of the OECS. It is the ambition of the 11 member states to construct this house, which we are calling the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, as a mansion of many rooms. And as the book says, a mansion of many rooms in which all have equal status. Just as in a physical project, there is foundational work that needs to be done in order to ensure the integrity of the structure. The creation of a unique OECS ID is one of those foundational tasks that needs to be completed in order to ensure that we have no impediments to the free movement and circulation of family members in the house of the OECS. We attempted once before to institute a multi-purpose ID card, but that faced its own challenges and it was not finally rolled out. It is important, therefore, that in recasting this piece of the foundation, we take into account the lessons of that prior experience. That is why we are taking the time to carefully document the roadmap for this undertaking and to engage all stakeholders from portfolios which would have the need for use of the unique OECS ID. It is very important that all stakeholders contribute to this process so that our consultants, NRB, can have the benefit of all perspectives, ideas, and also concerns in helping us map the way forward. There are many, many possibilities and opportunities for the use of the unique ID to streamline processes at local, governmental, and regional levels, and business levels as well, business circles. We are determined to ensure that this unique ID closes the circle of the free movement of people, the ease of doing business, the ease of accessing social and other services, among other purposes. We expect, therefore, that this will be a major foundational element in helping us realize the full integration of all of the member states of the OECS. And it is from that perspective that I welcome today's activity. I urge all of our stakeholders to be extremely vocal in sharing your ideas, your concerns, making your recommendations so that we can get this right. As Colleen indicated, it is funded by the World Bank, and we are deeply appreciative of the role of the World Bank. This will be the second time around that the World Bank is pitching in to assist us in achieving this particular objective, the first not having been brought to successful fruition. So let's get it right this time, and we thank our consulting partners, and we look forward to the journey to achieve this objective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jules, for setting the stage in terms of the importance of this unique ID. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Norway Registers Development, NRD's team lead, Gedra. I apologize, Gedra, I cannot pronounce your last name, but she will she will also introduce her team. But a bit about Gedra, who is the team lead and ideas for development expert with Norway Registers Development, as well as the director of consulting strategy. She leads consultancy work supporting digital transformations of national governments in different regions of the world, including socioeconomic and international development policy, being a policy advisor to national authorities and political bodies. From 2011 to 2014, she served as the alternate executive director for the Nordic Baltic constituency at the executive board of the World Bank. And from 2005 to 2011, she was a high-level official in the government as an advisor to the Minister of France. She also participated in the work of the National Election Commission and election observation work. So I'm very pleased to introduce Gedra, who is going to introduce the rest of her team. Welcome, Gedra.
Thank you very much, Carleen. Thank you for a nice, kind introduction, and thank you very much for opening remarks that's setting a right background for our presentations as of today. I will start by a little bit introducing the system which we are operating in today, the platform which we are using for participants who would like to actively take part in this webinar, and we very much hope for your active participation. The platform allows asking questions online during our presentations by typing the questions. So you can see on your right-hand side, there is an option of questions. You can, whenever you have a question, please feel free to post the question, and the team members will be answering these questions after the presentations. There will be also a few polls launched during the presentations, and therefore we will also would be very pleased if you would take your time to answer questions during those polls. So I will start then with introducing my team and company, and I will ask my colleague to put on presentation on the screen. So the title of the webinar today is Single Unique OECS ID and What Does It Take? And I believe participants of today's webinar has very different and broad and diverse experiences with identity, with regional identities and national identity management as well. And we tried to develop this presentation, this webinar, covering different aspects related to unique identity. So today's presentation plan, and me and my colleagues will be presenting what it is, unique ID in general, and how to build one. Then we will have a snapshot of unique IDs or unique identifiers or unique identities. It will all depends on how we name the concept in other regions. And we'll look at main aspects, features, and also we'll cover some use cases, in particular health, noting that this project is in light of health regional reform. And at the end of presentation, my colleague will be presenting more technical aspects on how your OECS can build unique ID and what are options and solutions. There was a reference already made with the existing or the solution which was planned and was aimed to be developed, and so we'll build on exactly on these experiences as well, and we'll provide some options and for solutions in building OECS unique ID. I will start with very brief introduction of NRD companies, just for you to understand who we are and where we're coming from. NRD companies is a group of technology companies that is working in different aspects of e-government, but also IT infrastructure, cybersecurity, and IT-intense industry solutions. So we mainly work with the public sector. We are supporting development of public sector reforms enabled with digital transformation, with digital solutions, but also have companies that cover already mentioned areas of the scope. NRDAS is part of this group and focusing on consultancy work, on advisory work for governments and institutions to prepare for reforms, for digital transformations. And we are utilizing the experience which we are getting from practical implementation of such solutions and projects. And therefore we have this both side experience, both reforms, planning and implementation, but also deployment of technical solutions and systems. So broadly we work in all areas of sustainable development, noting enabling business environment and jobs creation, increasing efficiency of governmental services, facilitating financial inclusion and access to finance, supporting domestic resource mobilization, social services, and others. This is geography of our projects. It's quite vast. We are not able to add yet one more project on permanent basis, but you can see that we work in all regions of the globe for more than 20 years. NRD is operating in the market, and we already have been working in Caribbean as well, and other small islands environments such as Pacific Islands. Presenters of today's NRD presentation, thank you very much, Caroline. I was kindly already introduced. And I am team lead for this assignment and identification for development expert. I will start the presentation with a general overview of unique identity. My colleagues today are Vaidotas Ramonas, and he is unique ID and digital identity expert. He has a long-standing experience in the areas of digital identity, electronic signature, and other trust services, and has vast experience in providing public and private sector organizations with consultancy services. He is also a director of Digital Services Department at the Regulatory Authority of Republic of Lithuania. He's also a board member and former chairman of the Forum of European Supervisory Bodies for Trust Service Providers. And he's active member of European Commission groups dealing with electronic identity and trust services. We are very happy to have him today, and he will be presenting especially different European countries and regions practices with a unique identity. Another colleague who will be giving presentation today is my colleague from NRDIS, Thomas Šeikus. He is ICT infrastructure, network, and security expert for this assignment. He's also a director of business development at NRDIS, and he is broadly experienced with information systems architecture, data backup, disaster recovery, and information system resilience. He is behind a number of innovative and tailor-made solutions in various regions when it regards to digital solutions and digital transformations. He's also a certified storage architect and information technology architect. So this is a team of presenters today. Seems we tried to cover different aspects of unique identity and digital identity, and we'll try to lead you through this road. Of course, the time for webinar is pretty short, and so we try to capture the most important elements of what we want to present. We very much hope we will have possibility to have consultations in the field and have opportunities for broader discussions with the countries, the member states that are covered by our assignment. But let's start with why unique, and I put in brackets, digital identity, because currently we're operating in digital environments, and it is hard to imagine that we can build identities without them becoming workable in a digital space. So I start with the context, and the context, of course, is not as broad as it is in reality, and His Excellency Director General already mentioned the different sectors for which identity is important. But to start from the very beginning, is a secure and trustworthy identity way to prove the identity for individuals is a precondition for person to exercise the range of human rights that are set in international laws and conventions. We mean that if individual doesn't exist, no rights can be exercised. So identity is a precondition for individual rights. Of course, identification is a basis for building inclusive societies where every individual has access to services provided by the state and that are guaranteed by the state. And we talk especially about those in need. And it allows no one to be left behind and restricted from these governmental services. Of course, lack of identification currently definitely restricts possibility to open bank account, vote, or get a formal employment, education, and other social services, but also private services as SIM card and already mentioned financial services. It is broadly known that states with weak identification systems have difficulty with government administration, planning, and service delivery. Already mentioned social programs, responding to emergencies, disasters, and epidemics, because to know your people is the precondition to provide any to your citizens. So we like very much this quotation by former Director General of WHO, who said that to make people count, we first need to be able to count people. And this can be a slogan of any identity system development in any country. So we, of course, refer to also Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which indicates a civil which indicates that every person has the right to be recognized as a person before law, and civil registration establishes the existence of person under law. And of course, Sustainable Development Goals, which commit, one of them very clearly, others have very strong references, but one commits very clearly that provide legal identity to all, including birth registration. So what it is, this unique identity? Probably nobody has any doubts about what is that. The identity of person is something, some characteristics that distinguishes him or her from the others. And its unique set of features and characteristics that individualize person, including name and other biographic data of the individual. And we were happily living with this identification probably for many years, but technological progress and emerging technologies, of course, prove that we need something more to the features which are for years, for centuries, were enough to declare our name and surname and some birth date. So because these are features which cannot be recognized in the digital world, and therefore we became in need of some unique numeric attribute that would allow different information technology-based systems to communicate between each other and recognize us as individuals beyond our names, surnames, and some biographical data. So this brings me, the concept of information and communication technologies brings me to a broader environment for our assignment here as well, is ambition or wish of OECS region to modernize public sector, and noting that modernization of the public sector is key to improving efficiency and competitiveness in the region. And I would like to, of course, make a reference that we are living in this very difficult times now with a global pandemic and related challenges that are beyond normal ambition of countries to modernize, to have ICT backed public sector or ICT supported public sector. Global pandemics as such shows how we are all interdependent, and how important for us is to know who we are, where we're coming from, and what is our experiences and practices, and when we talk about public health, but also digitization and digital e-government solutions became very much acute and important in many countries, because with the lockdown and with the situations we are in, countries realized that they cannot really deliver for their citizens even some basic services, and they cannot really know who already received the service and who didn't. Efficiency of health systems and heavy weight on health systems that many countries are experiencing now, of course, would be in position to be lifted with possibility to identify individuals clearly and to know who already received service or who is in need of receiving such. But beyond that, of course, building, enabling a business environment in countries also very much dependent on possibility to have digital services, digital solutions for them. So we see this regional context as an important precondition for our assignment, and also something which is driving our work here. So to improve efficiency and competitiveness of the region, especially noting the current emergency situation related to the global pandemic, and wish to develop services that would be available online. So reliable national digital identity system is a precondition for national e-government solutions and services. That is absolutely clear. And reliable national identity system is also precondition for regional solutions and services. Why we are putting this as a separate precondition? Because definitely national identity digital identity system has to be put in place before we start discussions and conversations on regional solutions. And we will go through this throughout our presentations today, because only reliable, secure, and sustainable digital identity system that supports unique identity, which starts at birth and is terminated at death, is in position to deliver for both national and regional needs, and also international needs. So the primary goal for each country would be to develop a reliable, secure, and sustainable digital identity systems. And this is a challenge which many countries and many regions are facing in the world. And the challenges related to this unique digital identity is that countries didn't develop comprehensive and reliable identification processes and identity systems that ensure unique legal identity of individual. This unique legal identity is important not to be having multiple identities, because then it doesn't serve the purpose, or dead souls, which we mean that individuals who are not existent anymore, but are not whose identities are not terminated in any of information systems. So therefore they remain living for many years after they decease. And then there are people without identity credentials and documents. So these are outcomes of not comprehensive and reliable both processes and the systems. Many countries have been developing identity management systems, or as they were called, identity management systems, during the last 10 years or so. But unfortunately, it can be noted that governmental identity management or national identity management systems very often missing one or even several key elements. And these could be, for example, digitized civil registration, which we will cover a little bit later. So without having all steps of identity management system, it is not possible to ensure this reliable, trusted, and identity system that would serve the needs for, which we already mentioned, public and private sector, but also regional purpose. Then another challenge is of course that the existing identity systems or elements of these identity systems are not integrated with other public or private sector systems, and therefore they cannot be utilized at full scope. So this integration of systems is also a weak point in many countries. I'm not referring here to any specifics in your region, in the OECS region. We will go through thorough assessment stage in coming month, but these are more general observations that are relevant to many countries in different regions, emerging economies and developing countries. And then different public sector organizations are collecting same information on individuals and developing their own identity management systems, which of course cost additional resources. Therefore, public resources or development partners funds are not used efficiently. So every public sector organization has to build their so-called identity management system, which they are utilizing, but which is not integrated. So they have to work thoroughly. They have to do a lot of work, and every public sector organization does the same work. Therefore, lots of efficiencies are lost, and these institutions are not at the end of the day still to deliver up to the standard and be able to verify individuals, because the core system, the national systems, are not being built. So these are very main major challenges that are being faced by different countries globally that didn't yet develop reliable identity systems. And what are elements? What is key aspects when we want to build unique and reliable identity in a country? So we captured few of them. Of course, these can be expanded, but just the major ones. And we start with a strong and international standards compliant legislation that is also defining a data set for identity system. And then we need a relevant organizational setting and capacities, because in many instances, identity management systems or technology solutions are started to be implemented without really having a thorough assessment or thorough look at the existing organizational and capacity settings. So these are also very important to consider. Yet another very important element, and even with organizational settings, legal environment, and even digitalized systems, well-established and fully compliant processes and procedures of registration and identification needs to be followed. And we very often forget this element, and we think that the technology solutions are solving this element, but they are not. And these processes and procedures have to be very strongly established within each country in order to bring reliable systems, a reliable identity management system in the country. Then few elements that are related to elements of identity system. And first is digitized and compliant civil registration that is continuous, permanent, obligatory, universal, and confidential, which means that civil registration has to capture all vital events of all individuals in the country, and we will talk about it a little bit later. Then credentials, such as unique identity number, the digital attribute, which I already referred to, has to be assigned at the registration of birth and terminated at death, because this unique identity number is something that supports data exchange between systems. I know that some questions may arise because there's a lot of discussion that there might be, biometrics can replace unique identity number. But we also, when we talk about building modern identity management systems, we also talk about cost efficiencies, and we do not want to be probably dependent on technological device that you have to have in every place where individual identity has to be verified. And therefore this unique identity number is something, this identifier that defines the individual in digital space, and individual identity can be verified with a governmental identity management system. And of course, identity is strengthened by biometrics at some moment in time, usually when individual biometrics is already reliable and can be captured and stored for several years, which normally is age of 16 or even a little bit earlier. And at that time, identity documents such as ID card and passports can be obtained, and are also documents that prove that is indicating or showing the identity of individual when he has to prove it. And definitely identity security by privacy and security measures needs to be ensured when we talk about digital environment and technological systems. I already mentioned several times, and I want to emphasize once again that civil registration is a foundational element of a national identity system. Why is that, and why it is so important? And this is actually the importance of civil registration is proved by a number of I don't want to say failures, but non-operational identity management systems that we can come across in many countries. Non-operational means that no unique legal identity of individual can be ensured and is not terminated at the death. And especially this aspect of identity, because some countries have developed their ID card systems, and they developed also technology solutions, so it's digital ID card systems. But when civil registration system is not in place, it's not digital and not integrated with ID card system, I'm sure also someone who is listening to this webinar can prove that you never know when the person cease to exist in a physical world. And therefore, there is a high probability that his identity may be stolen, may be used, misused, and therefore you cannot call your identity management system as reliable. Why we mention so many times that reliable identity management system. This is exactly the word or concept that is absolutely necessary when we talk, of course, national systems very much so, but when we start talking about regional identity systems, regional unique IDs, this is something which is absolutely a key aspect. And therefore, the entire process, starting from civil registration up to issuance of ID card and storage of ID documents, and up to termination of individual after his death in civil registration system, and therefore in all other IT systems where individual information is being stored, is absolutely necessary and precondition for reliability of the system. So yes, civil registration is a start, is where identity process identification process is being started, and it's there are several life events within the civil registration system. I would like to also mention and emphasize notification system aspect, because in many countries civil registration systems exactly are facing difficulties to perform, because notification systems are not comprehensive, are not utilized at their full extent. Even legislation or regulatory framework is there. Very often the enforcement is lagging behind, and therefore organizations as health organizations, but also communities and other organizations, also religious organizations, play a very important role in notification system for civil registration. And civil registration, which is universal, I want to emphasize this word, universal, compulsory, and continuous and permanent, is the core system where individuals entry into the identity management system. In normal times, in regular times, all individuals are coming to identity system. Here's a population registry at the center, as you can see, from civil registration system. All nationals or all people who are born in specific country. Of course, a population registry is more than that, but just to focus on civil registration. And definitely in the times when countries do not have yet a digitized civil registration system, and they need to develop a population list, population database, some of there might be cases of mass enrollment or mass enrollment projects where existing individuals, all individuals are being enrolled in the system, but not through civil registration, but through very often ID card system. And this is how the population registry, the comprehensive database of individuals, is being formed. But just to note that it's one of mass registration aspect, and normally all other individuals, when they are born, they should be coming from civil registration system. And then, of course, this using of identity data is used by other systems, functional systems, and registries. So CRVS principles, which I already mentioned a few times, it's universal coverage, continuity, confidentiality, and also civil registration data is very important for government planning, and is very, very much so for health sector, but also for all government sectors, because it provides information about population and its geographical disbursement as well. Once again, the events, vital events for registration are many, but life, birth, and death are fundamental and top priority for when we are building, of course, and if we want to build a reliable national identity management system. It's life, births, and deaths, very much so also already because as already mentioned, as of need to terminate identity in a digital space of individual who already received identity cards and other documents based on this unique identity number. So yet another element which I already mentioned is unique identity number. And what is this unique identity number? Unique identity number is a sequence of digits to identify a person and to ensure the interoperability of registers and other state information systems. This is how identity becomes digital, and this is how other public and private sector organizations can use this number for verification of individual, whether the individual exists, whether he is what he or she says he is. And the digital attribute need to be assigned at birth, or as already mentioned during the first mass enrollment, but has to continue as civil registration. It may consist of digits and letters, and there are some current practices which are related to this unique digital identity number, which my colleague also will cover in the next presentation. So when we talk about identity management systems, there are also an important aspect that needs to be noted, and difference between different systems that are sometimes confused between what is foundational and what is functional. What is foundational? Foundational are those systems that their identity is being established within those systems. And the system meant to be used by other entities, meaning by it doesn't use other entities' systems, it establishes identity, but when identity is established in these systems, this identity can be used by other systems. So such foundational systems are civil registration and ID system, ID card system. And functional systems is that these systems are using identity which is established with a specific purpose, and is established by using foundational identity management system. So you cannot, in other words, the identity system, identity which is established at the driver's license, you normally wouldn't be able to use a driver's license system for identifying individual in other systems. But if you establish when you establish identity in ID system, and when you have a unique identity number, it of course should and can be used by all other systems. If you're issuing a driver's license, you normally put unique identity number on driver's license, and this is identifier by which individual is being identified and can be recognized. But the driver's license system is not a foundational. It uses identity data already generated by other systems. So very often there is this mixture between where is foundation and where is function. So it's just an illustration how these systems differ. On your left is where identity is created and established. On your right, where identity data is being used. We put this picture for an overview of national identification system as a comprehensive picture of what it consists of. And as you see, civil registration is an important entry point for identity management system. Then there is a population registry. This is where data on all individuals in the country is being stored, and civil registry is of course the key registry which delivers data for population registry. But of course, as already mentioned, when there is no data in population registry, countries undergo a mass enrollment, or maybe integrating data from ID card system, which is also called sometimes enrollment at ID card system. And this data is being also stored in population registry. A unique identity number is being established also in population registry during the birth registration or during one-off mass registration. And the passport system also can be using the same enrollment system. What is important here, what we want to show, so this system, this national identification system, serves as foundation for using data or verifying individual data by authentication system, by other public and private sector organizations. These are just few mentioned. I will show more in other slide, but these include, of course, election lists, any other public sector organization, health sector, education sector. So when student comes to the school, we can verify whether the student agree, whether parents are who they are, and we can inscribe student in our system, in our education system or health system. So we check whether this individual exists, whether he is what he claims to be, and whether he still exists, and then within your internal healthcare system, you can cross-check and verify whether this individual already been served by other health facilities, and etc. And private sector, also financial services. If I'm coming for a loan, private sector, financial sector organization, they will be able to verify that I am whom I claim to be, and therefore it of course can provide the services at the more cost efficient way. It is not shown here, but when we talk about regional identity level, it also becomes here as a user of national identity system. So here also, as a other public or private sector organization from another country, from your region, would be also in position to verify your identity and provide services you are eligible to, which are agreed between countries. So in order to get to the regional integration, there is precondition to build national identity system. And it's good precondition because a country anyway absolutely needs such a system for already for reasons already mentioned before. So this is a set of information in population registry, and different aspects can be verified by different service providers. So just to show that national identification system in the form of population registry becomes a single source of reliable data on individuals. Single source, reliable are keywords here, because not to build parallel systems and to build comprehensive, full identity management system is exactly the precondition to use it for public and private and regional service purpose. So as you can see, of course, there's a bit technical picture, but of course, through this population registry we just shown, there is possibility to verify individuals and provide services to them in different sectors. What is important, of course, to know that sometimes there is this understanding that if you have identity management system, you don't need other systems, but of course you do. The other systems from other sectoral systems, they are integrating with the identity system. You don't need to build your parallel identity management system, and you use the data, or you can use data from national identity management system. So to make this work, of course, there are few layers of integration or interoperability between these systems. How to make this organizational foundational system to service functional systems, which we already mentioned from different sectors, public and private sector as well, is precisely to ensure interoperability at different levels. Means these systems needs to talk to each other at different levels, and it's either within the country or also within the region. So there's a technical level, which is very basic level, and now we live in the world where technology is definitely not an issue anymore. There's a great choice and great opportunities here. And the technology also, there is need to speak in the same language. So the systems need to understand each other, and this unique identifier, unique identity number, is something that needs to be understood by all systems within the country. But if we talk about the regional solution, other country systems also need to understand that this number means this person, and to verify this individual data. Then there are, of course, organizational aspects, and that every system, national system, uses data in agreed processes, so that the compliance of processes are followed, and processes and procedures are clear, understood by all parties, and trustworthy. So I can trust, from St. Lucia, I can trust processes that are being followed in Dominica and or in any other country, and the other way around. So I know that I can rely on the system, and that the data which is there in foundational system of one country is reliable and trustworthy. And then, of course, there's a legal aspect which is at the top of it, and here are, of course, agreements need to be reached, and mutual agreements between countries of which data, how, on which conditions may and can be retrieved and verified, in which instances, and of course how we govern all these organizational aspects. So I hope I fit into my time assigned for this brief introduction, and please feel free to ask all the questions. I see we have questions here. I also would like to invite you now to fill the first poll which we launch, and on your right hand side there is a polls section, and for all those participating, I would like to ask you to fill this question, which is about what identity management system in your country includes, and these are elements of the system. And if you please kindly share your knowledge about your country systems, we will be very happy then at the end of the webinar to share with you also results, and it will also serve as important input for our next stages of our assignment. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will now give a floor for my colleague, Vaidotas. He will present key elements of regional identity management systems and analytical work that is being done by NRD so far. Thank you. Please, Vaidotas.
Hello, everyone. And actually, like Giedrė mentioned, I'm going to talk about what are the main building blocks of identity system within other assessed regions and how they are constructed there. So actually on the slide, on the bottom of the slide, you can see that the basis for everything is a unique identity number. Like Giedrė already mentioned how it appears. But the idea here is to assign unique identity to your people, just for the two reasons. One reason is to know them, and another reason to have a unique identifier of the person within various systems. Because, for instance, personally, I know at least 4 people having exactly the same name and surname like me. So this information actually doesn't identify myself. But my personal identification number is unique to me. So everyone who gets it will know that someone this is talking about me. So that's the very important part. And yes, ideally it should be given at birth and for all life, and even I would say and beyond, because if the person dies, that same exact number shouldn't be given to anyone else, because it would be some misunderstanding. You won't know about what person you are talking. Yeah, so that's the basis. Then you have this block already in place. You can go further. And second block is about physical identity document. That's a result of this building block. And this building block actually contains out of the two parts. And one part is assignment of biometric data to that unique identity number. Because actually, if I will have only unique identity number and I'll go to the service provider, he won't be able to check that it's really me, or maybe I just pretending to be someone else. So the thing here is to assign some biometric data to that unique identity number, typically within population register, at a certain age. And usually we talk about facial image, which is quite used a lot in a lot of cases, and it is good. But it doesn't solve all the problems. For instance, if there are twins, you won't be able to check which one is one, and or just similar looking persons. So usually it is advisable to collect some additional biometric data like fingerprints, because it's not so easy to change them. For instance, you saw my picture on a previous slide and you can see me now. That picture was made half a year ago, and now it would be not so easy to be sure that it is really me. Yeah, but my fingerprints are still the same. And at this block, a second thing which is important is to give your people mean to prove who they are in physical world. And here mainly I'm talking about ID cards or passports. And that document ID card will contain that unique identity number and my biometric data, basically my photo or maybe fingerprints. I'm going to talk a bit about that a bit later, especially about digital part of ID card. And if you already have constructed these two building blocks correctly, yeah, that's a keyword here, correctly, then you can easily go to the third block and use this identity system to provide or get physical services. Because me as a person, I could go to a hospital, I will show my ID card, and a hospital personnel will be able to easily identify but it's me who has that identity number, and they will have this identity number within their system, and they will be able to reach all my medical records and other relevant information by integrations with other systems, for instance, national identity system. Yeah, so that's all here. Additionally to that, you could give your people means to prove who they are in digital environment. And here are several options. One option would be to give that same ID card, but with digital ID card functionality. Yeah, there are countries that are doing that. I'm going to talk about that a bit later. Or it could be completely separate our digital identity mean. For instance, an app within your phone or a smart SIM card within your phone. Yeah, but still that other identity should be based on physical identity document because it needs to be secure, it needs to be trusted. And at the end of that, you can provide digital services if your people have digital identity means. That means here that you can open a business without leaving your kitchen or open your bank account by staying at home. So that's how all this pyramid looks like. And what we did here, we assessed several regions and checked how these building blocks look there and tried to find what are the key aspects that are needed to know in order to build functional system. And on the slide, you can see what regions were assessed. And one of region is Nordic and Baltic region, several countries, Norway, Sweden, and Estonia. Second region is European Union region, actually is partly overlapping, but with France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And finally, the United Kingdom. And some of you probably now have a question in your heads, why these regions were chosen. And here on the slide, you can see several arguments, basically, for that. And the first one is all these countries, almost all these countries, has a long history of the use of unique national identification numbers. And as we talk, that is important basis, so we should look at the countries that know how to do that. All of these countries actually issue, except UK now, issue national identity cards, which are accepted not only on national level, but on regional level. Actually, what we try to reach here, because they are accepted in the whole European Union region as identity and travel documents, actually beyond EU region. And what's even more, all these regions has a legal and technical basis for regional acceptance of ID documents and even electronic ID documents. So that's three most important things here. And if talking about Nordic region, they have very interesting case with data exchange between population registers. So if a person who is born in Sweden moves to Norway, that population register entry will be moved to that country as well. So he lives even the population register of that country with all vital life events. And of course, few other options, reasons actually, that Baltic countries and Nordic countries are small in population and therefore really compatible to OECS countries. And finally, as health sector was mentioned as very important, and I do agree with that, especially in the light of recent COVID-19 issues. We try to look for the regions that have a well-developed health system, and actually all citizens of all these countries can get access to health services within all region without paying additional money. So that's good, and ID system is the basis for that. Okay, now let's look a bit further and let's talk about each part separately. And here on the screen you see what we found about unique identity numbers. And here actually all the countries except the United Kingdom have unique identity numbers, and they are assigned at birth, for life, and unite. So basically already what was discussed. Another interesting thing, where all these records are kept. So like you see, they're kept within various registers, like population register or civil registry, but the name might be different, but the main idea is the same. It should be official register with all information. The next thing, which is very important, how these people appear into register, how this number is assigned. And there are several options within these regions. One option is then local hospital informs the authority on the birth. That's really amazing option if all births are made at the hospitals. But it's not always true. So some other countries decided to choose another way, and that births must be reported, usually by parents. But there is a time gap within which it should be done, like from 3 days to 15 days, if you are talking about this region. And it's difficult to say what option would be best for your region, but I think that during consultations we'll try to find maybe a hybrid option would be best here. And a final thing, which Gary already mentioned, the structure of unique identity number is very important, because all these countries have very long history of unique identity numbers used, and most of them indicate birth date and gender. But now it seems that it is changing. And for instance, Norway from 2017 removes gender information from ID number. And there are several reasons for that. One reason, what was already mentioned, to avoid the information which could be used to discriminate person. And another thing is privacy of personal data. In European Union, they have quite strict requirements now, so some countries decide to move from this. Yeah, and here on the slide you can see the main findings within this area. I'm not going to go through all of them, because you'll have slides you can see and read in your own piece, but here are several things I really would like to stress. First thing, like it was already mentioned, that well-developed population registration systems is a foundation. Without that, you could build technical solutions, but at one time it won't work. And one of the reasons might be trust. So that's very important. Then, if talking about legal things, the structure of national identification numbers should be clearly thought about and defined within legislation. and of course with regional use in mind, in order not to have the same number within two countries of the same region, because it would be like difficult to decide which one is which person. But it should be clearly defined within legislation in order to avoid problems in the future related to discrimination and private data. Then, talking of technical point of view, integration between registers or systems, identification system and service systems is highly important, because the service system needs to know actual information about that person at the precise time of the moment. Information about his is that person still alive? Does that person exist? And is that identity document reliable and was issued at all? So integration between registers is very important here. And then if talking about promotional activities, if you're going to change something like structure of personal unique identity number, probably people will ask why. So here it's good to have answers for that. And one answer would be to provide optimal and efficient both governmental and private services to people. And then I'm talking about governmental, it could be, for instance, social services. If the country doesn't know how many people there are there, if a country doesn't know the geographical locations, it's very difficult to make a correct decisions related to people. For instance, if there is a region within a country with a very low number of a population, technically the resources given to that region should be smaller. And maybe there is another region with a lot of newborns. Maybe you should think about that as well. So it would be really, government could make a really better decisions. And if I'm talking about private sector, for instance, financial service, says having trusted source of identity information for institutions like financial institutions, banks are really, really very important, because it will lower the risk and lower the possibility of fraud. If the person comes to you with its identity document, and if you'll be able to check within a register that that person really exists, that this document is really issued to that person, then you can provide the services without some difficult additional checks. Yeah, so that's important. Now they're talking about second block, like physical identity document. On the screen, you can see that there is ID card in all of the regions except United Kingdom. United Kingdom had ID cards until 2011, but then probably due to political decision, we've decided to not have them further. And here are several interesting aspects. In some countries, ID cards are mandatory. In others, they are not mandatory. So voluntarily, person can decide whether they have a passport or ID card or both of them. But if ID card has some additional benefits, typically ID cards are cheaper, and ID cards can have some additional benefits. For instance, digital part, which could be used for as electronic identity, which passports usually can't. So that's a selling point of ID card could be. And I'm going to talk later on about Estonian case. Yeah, next thing is what information are you going to place on the card? Because if you place only a unique identification number, that card will be technically useless. So you will probably add at least some biometric data, so probably facial photo. That's absolutely fine. All the countries do that within that region. In some cases, they do add fingerprints if that card contains digital part where you can place it. And that's very good if you in the future would like to use this ID card for automatization of identity checking processes. For instance, border control. In that case, I could just place my ID card, give my fingerprint, and the system will be able to check whether it's really me carrying this card, because they know within the card will be unique identity number and my fingerprints, which are secured and encrypted. So that's fine. Additional thing, if talking about digital part, one aspect is like already mentioned. It could have digital part, which will contain fingerprints or facial photo, just for automatization of processes. Another aspect is that ID card could have a digital part which could be used as EID to identify yourself within various electronic systems, or even to sign electronic documents. I'm going to talk about that more in EID part, but that's really good, and this is a good selling point for ID cards. And if talking about this region, basically all, like already mentioned, all ID cards issued at any of these countries are usable as ID and travel documents within Nordic region, within European Union region, Schengen zone, and actually in various other countries, but based on separate agreements, because we follow baseline requirements agreed between these countries. And here are some findings from this part. Again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but there are several things that need to be discussed. For instance, you should decide what biometric data it will contain. Like I mentioned, preferably facial, photo, and fingerprints. But yeah, fingerprints could be like questionable. And you need to provide very good arguments why you collect that. If talking from legal and technical part, what is very important here, to set technical requirements for national ID card. And I'm talking about security requirements for the document itself, because it won't have any security measures and could be easily made at home. It will be useless. No one will trust it, both in national area and in regional, definitely. So there should be set requirements for ID card as a document. And additionally to that, there should be clear requirements for the process, organizational requirements for the process of issuance of national ID card. Basically, how secure will be identity checked before provisioning the document. Because if anyone could get the document, so without a strict identity checking, the document is useless. Yeah, so there should be requirements, and of course, they should be implemented. And if we go to a regional aspect, in that case, it's only enough to decide what minimal level should be implemented, and then you'll accept that all the documents. So that's fine. And of course, the biometric data, there will be probably a lot of discussions with public and politicians. And one of the point here to mention is that collection of biometric data is actually to protect people from the identity theft. If a document is weak and could easily be made at home, it will be very easy to steal identity of a person. But if the document is secure, no one is able to pretend to be someone else, that there will be very low amount of fraud. Okay, so let's go to the next part, which is about digital identity means. And here, as you can see, I'm going to talk only a bit about that all the countries here has digital identity means, the legal and technical basis for regional use, because they follow regional requirements, both technical and legal. So that's fine in all the regions there. One thing I would like to stress here, that some countries decide to use their ID cards as EID. And for instance, in Estonia, they issue ID card as ID as well. So you can use that card both to prove who you are in physical places. You can identify yourself within digital systems. You can use exactly the same card to sign a document, and this document will be accepted not only within Estonia, but within all EU region. And your digital identity will be accepted in all region as well. So basically, that convinces person to get that ID card. Of course, in Estonia it is mandatory, but if it won't be mandatory, it's still a good argument to get it. And some other countries do that as well. For instance, even my country, Lithuania, has ID card, which is EID card as well. Additionally to that, it is quite usual to give your people some other identity means. For instance, mobile identity, because some people really like cards. Yeah, it's secure, but you need reader. Some other people might be used to mobile phones, so they would like to get other solutions. So it is possible. It is possible to do that. Okay, so, and there are some findings from this part, and actually what I see here that is definitely useful for your people to give several types of identity means. The first one probably should be given by the government, but it could be even allowed, only even private sector could be allowed to issue identity means, but by following strict requirements and by checking identity using governmental issued ID, because in other cases it won't be trusted. Yeah, so first thing, and second thing, if you'll start issuance of EIDs, no one will use them. That's for sure. And I've seen that question in many countries, because the question from service providers, why we should develop digital service if there are no clients. And in case of clients, a client just asks, why should I get digital identity mean if there are no services? So it's very difficult to decide who should start, but government could start by issuing the first e-identity mean, and you need to find some ice-breaking services for the people that they use daily. For instance, in Lithuania, in Nordic region, that would be banking services or business establishment. It could be cheaper and faster. So that's a good selling point here. And yeah, that's the main findings. You will get slides, you'll be able to read them further. And that's all about identity system. And now a few words, only a few slides about one of the use cases, how this identity system could be used in relation to the health system, because it is important. And before going to my slides, I really would like to ask you one favor, or now, or a bit after a couple of seconds or minutes, on the right side, you should see a question related to health system in your country. So I'd really be happy if you could give some time and answer that question for us. And yeah, that would be amazing. And now I'm going a bit further. You already seen this slide, but I just wanted to repeat that when you'll have national identification system, it should be single source for reliable data on individuals. That's one place that anyone could check whether that person exists, whether this document is really was issued. And for instance, e-health is one of the systems which will be integrated to that authentication or identification system to get information about person. And that on this slide, you can see the conceptual design of health sector. I'm not going to talk about all of it. This picture, I just wanted to show you that probably one of the first steps here is confirmation of identity, because you must know who's the patient. And again, you must know that the doctor is allowed to get the medical records of that patient. In order to do that, you must identify them, and that's why national ID authentication system could be used. Just remember that usually national authentication systems or identification systems itself, they do not carry medical records. So they'll do their part. They'll just tell you that this person is the person who he claims to be, but all the medical records should stay in the medical system. And here's my last slide about health sector. Like I really mentioned, that these systems could be integrated because correct identification of person is crucial. Because, for instance, if a person comes to you, you need to check who is here. Maybe he's from other country, so then you should check, is he really the person who he claims to be, whether you are allowed to provide him medical services for free, and what type of services, because it's an agreement within region. And of course, if that country of his citizenship will pay for these services, that country really would like to know exactly that his citizen got some medical services here. So that's one part. Second part, that doctor as well must be identified correctly, because he will get access, both doctor and client will get access to very sensitive information, medical records. So that's a part where identification comes in. Second thing is integration between medical systems. So it is within country and within a region, because one patient might get some services in one hospital, some services in another hospital. And if you want to know exactly what's happening about that person, all the systems should be integrated. And the person, and additionally, there should be identification system, which with unique identification number that you could unite, that they are talking about exactly the same person in various systems. So integration is very important here. And few additional things, they are not related maybe to identification, but it's worth not forgetting we are talking about regional aspect. You should legally define on what conditions citizens of other countries or the region can get medical services. What types of services? Who is going to pay? Because it is really important. For instance, European region, I'm as a Lithuanian, I can go to Germany, show there my ID card, they'll identify myself, and they'll provide services for me for free, because they identify me as a citizen of European country, citizen of a region. Yeah, so that's all from my side now. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat area. We'll try to do our best to answer them. And now I would like to give the floor to my colleague Thomas, who is going to talk a bit about technical options and solutions for identity system. So Thomas, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Vaidotas, and of course, thank you, Giedre, for very interesting presentations. And I believe that they are very useful to all of us. I'm a little bit scared, it looks like so challenging. So I would like to ask our participants to write in the chat maybe some motivational sentence, that we can do that. We still believe that it's possible, it's doable. Because when it comes to identification, it's for me, it's not only fundamental, human right, but it's convenience. It gives people some chance to better communication with governments, and that its possibility be recognized by government, while giving them opportunity to listen and improve the lives of the service of citizens, and improve services which are expected by people in the country. So the role of robust and identification system and importance of this system to the country economic development is unquestionable. However, there is no single module, how to provide this legal identity, because country and context, different country has different contexts, and we need to find a way and discuss what is the biggest challenges and in this regional development, and what is the way to move forward. So globally, we are facing a situation when silent investments in registration and identification systems are likely to be wasteful and duplicative, with the same distracting from the far-reaching public and private sector implications of universal digital identities. And highly integrated, interoperable, and scalable ID system can provide huge benefits actually for citizens and for governments and for businesses. That is already discussed in Vaidotas' presentation a little bit. Pooled approach and federated ID systems at regional or sub-regional level can also help in strengthening the value proposition of identification programs, and trust in data security is very critical to achieving those tangible results. harnessing the power of identification systems requires strong political will and leadership and supportive institutional environment, and that is the main reasons why this journey is so challenging for many countries. But standard-based approach should be used to ensure interoperability of the systems, both actually at national and regional level, and that could help to drive the technology and decrease cost of implementations. In many countries, we need to understand that in many countries the design and implementation of civil registration and the identification programs and systems are shaped by cultural preferences usually, and some local regulatory requirements, technological maturity of the country, and privacy needs. That is the context which define one or another way to go. Mostly identification programs are often approached from different points of entry, which might include broad national ID initiatives or more narrow sectoral approach. For example, when you approach healthcare or social or financial sector, in the absence of unifying vision or strategy, parallel use of different points of entry can result in duplication and waste of public resources. And while each country context is unique, it's important to develop systematic approach to avoid such duplication and waste of resources. So during the execution of the sectoral initiatives relating to identification, countries tend to develop some parallel systems which often are neither connected or nor interoperable between each other. So for this reason, countries should seek to adopt some standard-based approach and link national systems and sectoral interventions to one united ecosystem which operates through interoperability layer, and that could of course result some enhanced interoperability of the system, but from another perspective it could create some unexpected use cases and probably unexpected electronic services for which are expected by citizens. So it's important to take to understand that this approach need to take into account various technological options that are currently available in the country or in the market, and in additional some regulatory and institutional realities also need to be accounted for and potentially adjusted actually to the new integrative approach. So yeah, that's actually the main challenges which we face during the implementation or during the regional development in the countries. So the question is, what is the? It is really so difficult or it's doable? So my answer is that it's doable if you have strategy and good team. So everything is possible to implement. And so actually, what is the wanted situation in most countries? We see that from best practices or as reference architecture could be used a highly integrated national ID system, which is built on foundational registries that aim to include the country entire population. And highly integrated ID systems are useful to governments and to citizens because they are typically integrated in with a multiple foundational registries, and they have some interoperability database and interoperability layer, which allows to exchange information between them. So such system may include some services or allow to create some digital services to manage, for example, social security benefits, food or fuel subsidies, or some government payroll or passport issues or another electronic services in the country. So countries that have integrated these systems, with their functional registries, can more easily track those benefits and assess them by each user, or they can minimize benefit leakage actually. So this model serves for many countries, serves as target when it comes to single country, and they move to integrate existing registries into holistic framework, supported of course by foundational registries, which are very important. Giedre already mentioned them, and I would like to stress this importance. So the model logically groups external stakeholders, organizations separately from country-specific identity technologies that will serve as infrastructure for delivering those services to residents of the country. And the model can be used to develop a country-specific integration strategy and roadmap, linking existing components in a scalable and methodical way. In simple words, this highly integrated model is most effective, and it combines best practices from different countries, and it could bring maximum benefits for the country, for single country, for some particular invested money. This reference model includes foundational systems and functional systems, as I already mentioned. So foundational systems are civil registries and unique national ID. And foundational systems are different kind of registers, which usually implemented in the country. In many cases, countries have both types of the systems in operation already. However, the level of integration between those systems are very different, and that is important point to mention, because based on this integration level, regional integration should happen as well. So in this model, stakeholders interact through integration layer, which is used to the common exchange of information among different registries, and integration layer is used as mean to standardize the exchange between each functional registry and foundational registry. So data usually are encrypted in such way that only parties with corresponding keys may access the information. And a good example for such tight integration could be, for example, Estonia and Finland. Both of them use X-Road as interoperability platform, so citizens could benefit from rich set of electronic services in both countries, which is a result of tight country integration as well. Yeah, I just want to come back. As well, people could benefit from cross-regional services as a result of some of usage the same technology in integration. Yeah, so presented centralized integration model support other integration approaches as well. This model can be adapted to accommodate some regional, federated, and hybrid models. Regional model is when country achieve integration objectives and has already mature foundational ID system in place. They can consider to integrate with neighboring countries, for example. So important takeout in this context is that country-wide integration is prerequisite for regional integration, and that is like the meaning which already were discussed in Giedre and Vaidotas presentation. That first of all you need to solve the question with foundational registries, with civil registration process, with ID, with the identification, with enrollment in the country, and after that you can move forward and start thinking about regional integration, because without that gonna be only a big mess. So good examples of regional integration, it's X-Road, for example. I already told that Finland and Estonia, they achieve quite significant results. And for example, if you go from Estonia to Finland, and if you have accident, so doctors from Finland, they can access your sensitive medical data through secure environment, through X-Road, and they can see your medical record from hospital in Estonia. At the European Union, that project could be like Stork or similar regional integration projects. Federated model is the model when in regional model actually usually information is which exchanged between countries or between participants are limited, and it includes some very defined amount of data, and usually it excludes some biographical or contextual data in order to realize some cost saving and result from common identity services, for example. In federated model, each partner country has its own functional registries, but offers partners the kind of ability to federate data, biometric-based data or biographic-based data. So they allow searches against each other identity systems, and it's enable agencies to more accurately actually identify migration, fraud, or illegal activities of the person in some particular domain, because it's a little bit more trust and more information could be exchanged between the systems. And of course, hybrid model approach combines some elements of the previously described integration approaches, and it's some kind of mixed integration between federated and regional model. So when defining a highly integrated national ID systems, it is important to look and not only to the ID system and technology behind it, but also the surrounding policy and regulatory and institutional structures that support enforcement of the systems. So for that reason, however, each country has very different context, as I mentioned already, and some kind of framework which frame all those features could be presented in this table. And idea is that each benchmarked feature of the national ID system is kind of a reflection of the difference in progress between the highly integrated state systems and systems falling into the one of the three presented categories, actually. So majority of the countries of emerging countries would say that they need to address a number of areas before the reaching highly integrated state. And these countries can be grouped into three categories described. So advanced, intermediate, and greenfield. So advanced could be defined as nation that has the majority of the features that define a highly integrated state, but maybe lacking some maturity in a few of them, actually. So advanced country should have strong foundational registries and integrated framework, and generally have specific improvement plan to address those weak points. Intermediate could be defined as one that has taken measurable steps to develop a digital ID system, but still has some significant improvements to make in order to ensure that the system is scalable and can be integrated with existing registries. Yeah, so it will either have a foundational database in place or have efforts in progress to improve or digitize one, and typically it require improvements in its networking infrastructure and community outreach strategy in order to ensure that access to a digital ID and to national ID is possible in a to the majority of population. And greenfield country is defined as which country which has rudimentary or no registry integration directly. So it's like blank state to start digital ID program. So based on very initial findings, actually, what is important to say that we just try to conceptualize and map OECS countries, and area marked by red lines shows some current state of OECS countries. And one single feature, actually, it's important to understand that we see that the situation is quite good. Is like most of the countries has indication and some features of intermediate classification. However, it's important to say that some areas still need to be improved, and it's still actually there is some room for improvements. In the next three slides, we will present three possible regional solution options with different levels of country integration. And so first option is that each country develop own foundational registries and only establish some mechanism to interexchange data. This means that there is no big dependency on other countries. If one country fails or another countries still can operate at regional level, and they could have fully functional system. And but the following architecture actually has a number of constraints, and it's important to say that it's very costly option, because each country should invest to its own infrastructure and system development, and they should operate the system, they should maintain, and so on. This architecture is complex and requires some significant resources for human and from financial perspective as well. Integration between countries is also complicated, because if you want to integrate one hospital in country A with hospital in country C, so it means that they need to agree with some country authorities. They need to agree this what amount of data will be integrated, and it's many-to-many integration, and it's create some complex environment actually for integration and to manage all those data, and as a result, from security perspective, it results some quite big challenges related to security and to management of security, because each entry access to the entry point brings some potential threats. Okay, let's move forward. And second option is that that foundational registries are developed as single technical solution and deployed to each country with single integration layer as default feature. In this way, integration is easier to achieve, and architecture is still complex, but it's significantly easier than in option one. From financial perspective, it means that less investments is needed for the system development, and because it is going to be similar system, each access and entry point should be managed by responsible institution. However, single technical solution will increase technical security as well, because if you develop single solution with security in mind, you can prevent a lot of possible threats and possible security issues. So each organization at country level still can be independent in day-to-day business, but have access to the unified cross-border service in the same time. So main constraints are that each country is one or another way dependent from another country in this way. And of course, this option requires consensus between countries and more efforts during the initial stage for establishment, and require some political support for that. And of course, data exchange policy should be agreed between countries and continuously governed by some institution, probably in each country, but they should have mechanism how they achieve single vision between those four institutions in the countries. And the last option is that foundational registries are built as single united system with single integration layer inside, and the system could be hosted and operated and governed by single shared governance body. So there is very much benefit in this option, like less investments, cheaper maintenance, increased security, and so on. But of course, we understand that this option require very strong political commitment to establish single governance institution, which will be mandated to procure such a system, and after that maintain the system and exchange of data and all governance issues. So in this case, member countries should agree on financial model to ensure continuity of such organization. And to be honest, we believe, or I believe, that the right way to go is somewhere in the middle between option 2 and option 3. From technology point of view, it's possible to implement very different and sophisticated scenarios, and I believe that after detailed assessment, we will find most effective way to move forward for OECS countries, and most effective technical solution to integrate. So from my side, that's all what I want to present here. And very soon some pools will be opened as well, and I would like to ask all participants to answer to the pool question. And yeah, so Ward, it's to back together right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Thomas, for your detailed presentation of technical options going forward. And yet again, to remind everyone that there is a new poll opened on your right-hand side, which is exactly trying to find your opinions, whether which OECS ID option you would consider as a preferred one. And there was option 1, 2, 3. I hope you can remember those and to choose your option. Just I try to remind you here. The last part of the presentation is to present you with the next steps, because we also can see in a questions part that people are asking for questions whether these elements or another elements are going to be covered during our assignment or already are covered. So just to let you know that NRD basically started the assignment and underwent this desk review and analysis of situation in other regions, and also was intending to have this webinar for giving a background for our consultations that is the next step for our assignment for 4 member states. And we will carry out consultations with institutions where we will also look at the current identity management systems, and we'll try to define what can be reused for when we are willing to build a unique regional identity system, which means we still have to build national identity systems. That what we wanted to make clear, that without a national identity management system, you hardly can build any regional solution that is viable. So we will look into each of these 4 countries' current situation, what can be reused, what needs to be updated or changed, also covering different aspects: organizational, regulatory, technology aspects, and what needs to be built. So we will, at the end of this assessment stage, we will be issuing a country-specific short reports, so-called gap analysis. So we will look at the gaps, and we will provide recommendations for each of these 4 countries. And then we will move to another phase of our assignment, which is detailed action plan, and to build on the best international practices and practices in other regions. We will present a roadmap where how we can get into the desired situation of regional unique ID. And so for the other also related aspects as regulatory, legal regulatory, governance, organizational and technological aspects are going to be covered in this report. The action plan also to include the pilot or proposed pilot is exactly use of a single unique OECS ID in e-health or health sector for cross-border use case. So that is something which we also noting and understanding the the criticality of this question going to include. So this is where we'll go from here. And therefore, maybe some of your questions, which are very, very relevant and very useful for guiding us into assessment stage, we're not yet in a position to fully answer, but we definitely will give you more details on that. And Caroline will help us to moderate the answers to questions session. So please, Caroline, thank you.
Thank you, Gedre, and thank you to you and your team. This has been excellent information and presentation. I must say I myself have learned a lot, and I'm thinking about things very differently, understanding the gaps, and like everyone else, we're very motivated. So I'm looking at the questions that are in the question and answer session, and I think what I'll do is look at the most popular questions first. And the most popular question which was put by Olivia Burton-Mark was, will there be a legislative gap assessment to ensure uniformity across member countries regarding the issuance of ID? So I think this is a question you guys can answer with regards to the plans of the assessment. Gedre, I think I'll hand that over to you. At least 7 persons have agreed to ask that question. What do we say?
Definitely, yes. Thank you very much. That's I see a very relevant question, and it's exactly what we tried to reflect also, that this technology and other aspects, organizations, but definitely when we talk about regional solutions, the regulatory and legal environment is very important aspect of that, of what countries agreed to anything technology or organizations they will follow. So we will build on experience in other regions as well, and we will give a high level recommendations, because not specifically that was not specified as a main objective of our assignment, but we will try to provide high level recommendations of what needs to be considered when we talk about regional solutions of this scale and of this purpose. So this is the answer.
Thank you very much, Gedre. And so, I mean, we're at the beginning, and this is one of the things that we will have to take a deeper dive into. Certainly from the point of view of the OECS Commission, we would be looking at it across member states, across our independent member states, but also, having to have a process along with a deep dive in terms of that legislative gap assessment. So just to say that this is the first step of a process that will continue and will continue under the guidance of our regional integration department and through likely our 11th EDF project. So there are many more steps to come. Let me go to two other questions that are very popular, both from Colin Murdoch. So the first one, I'll speak to privacy first. Are there privacy issues for a card that will share information among several independent countries? Gedre, you know who from your panel would be best suited to answer this. We've looked at several regional situations, so.
Okay, so maybe I will ask Vaidotas to address this question related to security measures and to card security measures when we talk about regional solutions.
Yeah, my microphone is on. Okay, so I'll try to answer this, and regarding privacy issues, it depends. If there will be, like I mentioned, there should be regional legislation and requirements for the issuance and maintenance of ID systems, and basically if these systems will follow the requirements, there shouldn't be any privacy or security issues there. If it's that from issuance and part, if they're talking about just information which is written on ID card, it shouldn't be any problem there, because person itself controls the card, and he controls to whom this card could be shown. So that's how it works, at least in all European region. So if talking about infrastructure, if technical organization requirements will be set and followed. There shouldn't be problems from that side. And if talking about ID card as a mean, then a person controls it. Yep, I hope I answered at least a bit.
Yes, I think you put it in context, so thanks a lot for answering that question. I think persons have any other clarifying questions, they'll put it in here. I will go to the next most popular question I see in the chat, which was also put by Colin Murdoch. Will the card distinguish between OECS citizens? So I guess I'll ask, can the card or can an identity system distinguish between OECS citizens who are entitled to certain benefits under the revised Treaty of Bastille and OECS non-citizens, or I guess residents, who are not entitled to such benefits? And Gedre, you know who to farm that out to?
Maybe I will try to answer that briefly, because what we tried also to present that, the card is an ultimate document, but how important is entire process, and that only from card you, I hope I can be seen because I got some notification, only from card you cannot get enough information. The card itself, provides information on individual as any identity document. But to verify whether, the card holder exists, for example, yes, because it's a very common issue that there might be card holder who brings another person's card, or the card of the person who is deceased and who doesn't exist anymore, or exactly according to the existing agreements, not eligible to receive one another's service. So there are these layers of integration that need to be followed. Only one card doesn't provide you this information. You have to verify within your system. Your system is verifying with the identity system of specific country. So this is all the process that needs to be followed. And of course, that this citizen from this country might be eligible, but you still have to verify whether he exists and whether the individual who brings card is exactly the individual who he or she claims to be. So it depends, of course.
Ask you, because I think that the question is citizen versus resident. So is that able to be put into the layers of the system?
Is citizen versus resident can be put in the system. There are some situations, for example, that we have citizens or people who are Norwegians, but then people who are residents in the country and who came just for working. Yes, so they have a different unique identity numbers, for example. So this can be already indicated in the card. But definitely, maybe not all residents also have this possibility to use services. So that's why it's a card is very important, and your identity number is very important information source for the service provider. But still, he or she they verify your identity with a system, with their system, so to be sure that you are who you are and you exist.
Great, thank you for that. And we have lots of questions. I'm going to now what I think is the next most popular question, which is closer to the top, from Livia Burton-Mark. It says, good presentation from Vaidotas. I'm probably saying it wrong. Questions on cybersecurity, particularly for our region. Noting that there isn't a regional supervisory framework for cybersecurity. So the question is about, and I think some of this was addressed in terms of the options proposed, but I'd like to hear a response. And then further, how does GDPR compliance fit into the digital ID system? So here's a couple of questions around cybersecurity and GDPR compliance.
Maybe I ask Vaidotas also to reflect on that as much as possible from perspective of.
Okay, thank you, Lydia, for for questions. And actually, I'll start from the second part about GDPR and digital ID systems, including security requirements. The good message here that within Europe, the European Union region, there is a legislation which actually covers that from the start to the very end with legal and technical basis. And this is, if talking about digital ID, this regulation is called IDAS regulation, Regulation on Electronic Identity and Trust Services within Internal Market. And it has included the part which says that other countries, other regions can use this regulation. And if talking about GDPR, this IDAS regulation as a main regulation has a link to GDPR, saying that personal data issues should be made by respecting requirements of General Data Protection Regulation. If you are GDPR is what I think it is here. So with digital ID, there are 2 European documents which could be followed here as a best practice, as the objective technical requirements. If going to a first part, because by the way, IDAS regulation covers cybersecurity issues related to digital ID as well. If talking a bit broader, not limiting ourselves to digital ID, but about national supervisory frameworks for cybersecurity, again, here there is European regulation which could be used as a best practice, and it is called, one of the pieces is called Framework Directive. It sets security requirements for telecom sector. And another piece of regulation, which is called Network Information Security Directive. It's a shorter name, actually. It has a bigger name. And this regulation directive covers all cybersecurity aspects within all other areas. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. So good message here that there is good practice backed up by technical standards.
Thank you, Vaidotas, very much. And I would also like to ask Thomas to a little bit expand on that, because we know that security, cybersecurity issues are very important for all regions. And from the system perspective, maybe Thomas, can you a little bit reflect on this part as well? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Cybersecurity, of course, it's an important topic, and it should be considered as much as possible, but I cannot see that somehow some regulation in cybersecurity area, how it could stop this ID project, because it includes, of course, it includes some components or aspects of cybersecurity, but they could be solved by some organizational measures, or by some, I mean, lower level regulation documents in the countries. So my short answer is that yes, it's important, but it should be no deal stopper for implementation and for moving forward this cybersecurity regional regulation.
Excellent. So, I mean, it was good to hear both of those perspectives. And just for me to put a sort of a regional spin on it, in the first response, there was mention of national regulatory frameworks or entities. And just to say that in our region, especially because of small populations, there are often regional entities to be considered. And so maybe as part of our processes, we need to be looking to our existing regional entities within the OECS. We've got ECTEL, and we've got you know, other agencies that exist, and at the wider CARICOM level that exists. And then we may be, or is it that we're looking at new entities that we need to form on a regional basis to be able to facilitate the process? So I think that was part of the question, and I think we're all thinking in that way. Let me now move to 2 more questions that both are from Livia, and have at least 3 persons agreeing. So here, one would imagine that for digital ID systems to be effective, it must be readily acceptable during course of business. The FATF requires that financial institutions utilizing digital entity ensure that the identification is adequately validated. I think for some reason I'm not seeing, okay. Yes, I'm not sure as there's a question, actually no, the question is, how would financial institutions be able to validate digital ID presented by customers during the due diligence process? So that's the question. So this is a use case, which is close to heart for some of our stakeholders.
Absolutely, absolutely. And definitely it's one of the very important use cases. And I believe in many countries, as also Vaidotas has mentioned, it is an icebreaker, because financial sector is extremely interested and really can improve access to financial services to citizens and businesses by having this possibility to validate or to validate individual identity. I don't have slides now at hand, and we didn't provide this example, and we will have possibility probably to consult with the financial sectors in different countries. But exactly by having an access to this basic information or validating that this individual is who he or she claims to be, and the person exists, is already the very important information which a banking institution shouldn't collect. But of course, there are systems of financial institutions like Know Your Customer and other systems that definitely use the information from national identity management systems, and they can and they are verifying or verifying individual identities in collecting the information on the credit record or other aspects of individual, and thus making this process much more efficient and at the end of the day cheaper for the customer himself. So financial sector is really a user of such a systems, of identity management system, a heavy user, but also on the other hand, the financial sector also provides possibility for authentication of individuals, also for other services. And maybe I will ask Vaidotas a little bit to expand on that, because it is an important sector, not only from user, from validation, from user for internal use, but also for external use of identity. Vaidotas, could you expand also on that a bit?
Okay, yeah, actually, very good question, and I'm really a fan of financial sector because at least in Lithuania, I was one of the persons who led our banks to this all electronic identity thing, and that's why I can open bank account without leaving my kitchen. Yeah, but like first part already was described by Gedra, that how bank itself could check identity, could get information about whether the person exists, that it could be trusted, credit history, etc. If talking about the technical part, how bank will check whether that person is the one who he claims to be, it actually depends on a technical solution chosen. We could talk about that later, what solutions are used in Nordic countries, because it's widely used, but that was very interesting thing, it was touched by Gedra, as banks actually are on one hand users of the identity means, but on the other hand they are providers of the identity means, because bank has a lot of clients. Banks usually cover almost all the population, and they have information on that person strictly identified. And then they can, if a person wants to identify himself within some other system, he could just say, okay, I would like to be identified, and I'll use my banking service to identify me, to prove that I'm really who I claim to be. And then I press a button, I go to my banking service, I'll identify myself there with banking means, and bank transfers information to that service provider that, yes, this is exactly the person who he claims to be. And that works, and that's probably one of the most popular identification mean in Lithuania, and I bet in all Nordic countries. Yes, so yeah, financial sector is very important from both parts, like a user and a provider of identity mean. As I mentioned, there might be identity mean issued by government, but it could be identity mean issued by private sector as well. So that's an example. Yeah, I hope that answers. Yep.
Yes, I'm hoping you can hear me. I'm looking at the time, so we've been on for 2 hours and 15 minutes now, and I think this will be the last question. Some of the other questions I think were answered in the process of answering these questions. So my last question, again by Livia, would be to mention, and I think it's been addressed, but I'll mention it again, whilst technology is not an issue in our region, the availability of reliable networks continue to be a problem. To what extent are we engaging the various service providers to ensure that the digital identity systems are reliable? So Gudra, as a final question, I give this to you.
Maybe Thomas. I got, yes, maybe he is already supplementing.
Yeah,
it is an issue, yes, in many regions.
Yeah, of course, network and accessibility to the services could be issue, but that's general issue. You know, in your country, if you have poor network connectivity in the country, and so what to do? You need to invest. You know, you need to develop some plans how to move forward and invest some money to achieve better accessibility when it comes to connectivity, because it has nothing to do with identity system. It's technological question. It has impact on all your services, which are electronic services, which are provided right now or which are planned to provide in near future. So each country should develop those networks and somehow should have strategy to make electronic services or accessible to the people. But when it comes to identity by itself or some technological solution for identity, so this question could be, of course, should be investigated more deeply, because maybe there is some technological limitations to establish some good connection between countries, but usually it's doable. It's important issue, but there is no rocket science with that.
Okay,
So
thank you, Thomas.
Probably,
yes.
Yeah, probably we can promise to investigate this question and to be more careful during the planning of the upcoming system, or during the assessment. We can put our eyes to this question with more accuracy.
Exactly, that's what I wanted just to supplement now. Me supplementing Thomas, that we will look into the current situation within the countries, and whether this will prove to be one of the biggest challenges. Definitely, the action plan will have to address it in one or another way, proposing one or another solution or technological solution, or maybe dependency on this network availability.
Thank you for that, and I think our colleagues have identified additional stakeholders. If we hadn't included them on the national and regional level before, you know, these are stakeholders that we would want to engage to understand what the potential limitations may be there. So I think we've covered quite a few of the questions. There was a question on whether slides will be available, and yes, they will be. And we will find a way to get them to you. You would have registered to be on this, so we should have your contact information. And so I'm going to hand you back over to Deirdre to close us out.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Thank you very also of chat. I just wanted to share a few thoughts after this introductory webinar. First of all, thank you very much for your attendance. We are very happy to have this really very good attendance of the webinar. We hope we covered the aspects which were of your interest. It's not the end of the process. We will have consultations in the member states, for member states. We hope to cover more in detail those questions that are of your interest, and we can have more extensive discussions. The question which was posed by my colleague Thomas about can we do it, are you not giving away up? It was great to hear really positive, dedicated comments saying that yes, we can, we're ready to do that, because definitely it's time to do that. And now it's really, when we talked at the beginning, is it competitive advantage of country, region, etc.? It is indeed. It's now a precondition for being competitive advantages in the region and globally as well. So developing your national identity management systems, comprehensive and full and universal, is really something that stands between probably you and being a really more active and more competitive in the global and regional environment. So great to hear your very positive reactions to that. And probably last but not the least is that the action plan which we are developing, of course, is the beginning of the process, and much will need to be done, but it is really achievable. And if somebody could do that, you can make it yours as well. And if we follow, our role here is to guide you and to see what is the most desirable way of moving forward from you, and how you see the process, and to engage and to be really engaging in this process, because it's not consultants who bring you something and you just don't feel the ownership of this process. It's very important that you feel the ownership, and very much agreed with the comments from you that political commitment is needed, but political commitment comes from understanding the benefits of this. So our role here is also to present benefits, how things can be reached, what can be done in a shorter terms. So it motivates, because when the process is long and you don't see benefits in some foreseeable future, it's really difficult to engage in such a process. So we will try to make the action plan or to talk with the countries and present reports exactly showing what are these low-hanging fruits, where you have to put your attention first, so to have some sort of positive developments to be motivated more to move forward as well. So thank you everyone for your attendance. We hope to see you in coming weeks in your respective countries, and maybe in some webinars that will be also organized in the context of this assignment. So back to Carlene. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I want to take the time to thank NRD companies and for all the panelists, for all the presentations. It's been very excellent, and for all the participants. And I would like to wish everyone a productive rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.